Hello, and my name is Nerina, and 3 days after my family begged me to stay, I left without saying a word. But before that, my mother locked me out on a freezing balcony because I turned on the heating. I stood there, waited chattering from the cold, watching them laugh and eat their dinner while I begged them through the glass. They didn't forget me. They deliberately ignored me. LW just the cold. It was the weather he wrote every part of me, cut me out of family stories, deleted me from the will, and told the world there were only 3 of us. So I disappeared quietly. No note, no goodbye. But why, after all that silence, did they suddenly beg me? And what did I do when they finally realized I was never coming back? The heater always made a faint hum, the kind that fills quiet rooms with comfort. But in a willingly house, that sound was treated like a sin. I remember clearly that winter night in Boise. The snow pressed against the windows, the kind of cold that wraps around your bones and won't let go. I was sitting in the living room with a book on my lap, watching my breath form little clouds. My mother, Vera, came in and looked at the thermostat as if it were evidence of a crime. You turned it up again, she said. Her voice blew out, but it had that sharp that meant an argument was coming, whether I wanted it or not. It's me on ένας βαθμός Κελσίου outside, I replied, keeping my tone steady. The heating is barely working. She interrupted me. Barely. You think the electricity pays for itself. You live here for free, Nerina. You don't decide what's wasteful. From the sofa, my sister Colster laughed without looking up from her phone. Mom, if she is so hot, let her sleep outside. I could have said something, but I didn't. That had always been the rule here. Silence was safer. The house was a small bungalow on the edge of town. I worked part-time at the public library, sorting donated books, placing books that smelled of dust and time on shelves. I told myself that my stay here was temporary, a way to save money until I could buy my own house. But deep down, I knew the truth. Living was never easy when you were raised with the idea that living meant betrayal. After dinner, I turned the heat back on. There inside the house was freezing, and my fingers were too stiff to type my work notes. Within minutes, I heard her voice again from the hallway. Didn't I tell you to turn that off? She entered my room, arms crossed, and Callista right behind her, like a smiling shadow. If you want it so hot, Vera said, maybe you should go sleep outside and see how much you appreciate the heat. I looked her in the eye. You're serious, she said, shrugging her shoulders. Try it. You'll learn something. It should have ended there. I should have left, I said nothing. But my pride judged the better of me. I opened the sliding glass door to the balcony and went outside, thinking that maybe the fresher would clear my head. I needed space, even if it was freezing. The door closed behind me with a quiet click. I turned the handle, but I didn't budge. At first, I thought she was teaching me a lesson, that she would unlock it after a minute or two. But when I saw her walk past the window with a cup in her hand, pretending not to see me, I understood. She had locked it. It started snowing again, slowly at first, then more intensely. The light on the balcony flickered and went out. Through the window, I saw the blue glow of the television. Vera and Colster were laughing at something on the screen. Oshin, my father, was also there, quiet as always, holding his cup as if it could warm him from the guilt he refused to feel. I tried knocking once, softly, hoping someone would hear me. Nothing. I wrapped my arms around myself and sat down on the wall. The metal railing burned my back with its coldness. Time dragged on. Snow piled up on the balcony floor. My hair stiffened from the frost. I could see my reflection in the glass. Pale, small, almost ghostly. That is what I had become in this family. The silent ghost they could forget existed. I thought about when I was a child, maybe 9 years old, and I brought my mother a handmade card that said the best mom in the world. She smiled and said, "You're truly his paper." That was her version of love, of correction, not of comfort. I learned early on that love here was something you earned by being invisible. At some point, my feet went numb. I pulled my coat tighter, but it blew enough. I watched the snow fall until the world turned wet and silent. Inside, their laughter continued. Hours later, maybe 2, maybe more. The door handle finally moved. Vera opened it a little, just enough to say, "It didn't waste electricity." I went back inside. The heat from the living room hit and whisking like Astin. I wanted to scream, but I didn't make a sound. She turned the heat back on and went to bed. The next morning, no one said a word about it. Kalista asked me if I wanted pancakes. And my father was reading the newspaper. And my mother hummed softly as if nothing had happened the night before. I ate silently, and my hands still aching from the cold. I watched them move around the kitchen, each step rehearsed. Every gesture part of the same silent play we had been performing for years, pretending we were a family. That night, when I lay down in bed, I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling until dawn broke through the blinds and decided something simple. If I stayed silent, I would disappear. But if I spoke, they would make me pay for it. I didn't know which of the two was worse. So I whispered in the dark, more to myself than to anyone else. That night, I realized that warmth had nothing to do with heaters. It had to do with who decided who deserved it. The next morning, I became invisible in my own home. I walked into the kitchen and was greeted with the smell of pancakes and bacon. This idea of a nice family breakfast. She always cooked something warm the day after she had made something cold. Kalista was already sitting there, looking at her phone while drinking coffee from her favorite mug. The one with the gold lettering that said Boss Babe. And my father, Oshin, sat quietly at the end of the table, the newspaper hiding his expression. No one looked up. No one acknowledged that I had entered the room. A chair was missing. I stood there for a moment, unsure whether to ask about IT, and I decided not to give them the satisfaction. I took a plate, put a pancake on IT, and ate leaning against the counter. No one spoke to me, not even when I leaned over the table to get the syrup. Only silence, as if I were an extra in a scene I once stored in. They laughed at something Kalista said, some inside joke about someone from church. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard her say, some people just love to play the victim. Their laughter followed. And my stomach churned. I wasn't sure if they were talking about someone else or if they were preparing me for myself. After breakfast, I cleared my plate. They didn't ask me to. They didn't tell me not to. I did it out of habit. Then I walked down the hall to the laundry room to do some washing. The basket was full. Most of it wasn't mine. I folded the women's clothes as usual, stacking various neatly on the table, even though she would pretend she had done it herself. Later that afternoon, while Kalista was relaxing on the sofa watching a home renovation show, Vera sat next to her, telling an old story from when we were little. She smiled as she spoke, her voice softening with fake nostalgia. She said, raising two wonderful children like Kalista was the joy of my life. Second, I sat in the armchair across from them, close enough to hear every word. I didn't blink. Kalista didn't even look at me. She just rested her head on their shoulder and said, "You did everything for us, Mom." I didn't say anything. Not then. I just stared at the silent TV screen, watching a couple smile as they knocked down a wall between their kitchen and dining room. I wondered what it would be like to break something that was supposed to keep you together. The rest of the day passed like that, quietly but not peacefully. At dinner, I decided to keep a wide distance. Ate early and returned to my room, where it was colder, but I preferred the silence that came with no criticism. Then the bill arrived. That evening, I went into the kitchen to make tea. Vera was standing over the dining room table, holding a piece of paper in her hand as if it were a summons from the court. She didn't look up when I entered. "Do you know how much the electricity bill went up last month?" she asked me. No hello, no politeness, just accusations. I opened the cupboard, took out the tea bag, and said nothing. It went up 63 times. It's no coincidence. She slammed the bill on the table. And look here. You used the heating more. We monitored it. Collister came in, leaned over the refrigerator, and crossed her arms as if waiting for an encore. I told you last week. No unnecessary use. Vera continued. You're a grown woman who still acts like a child. You offer no value to this house, Nerina. Only cost. Oshin was passing by, heading for the garage. He didn't stop, didn't say a word, just kept walking as if he didn't heard anything. He had become good at that. Are you going to say something? I asked, turning toward him. He stopped with his hand on the door. It's better not to stir things up. I almost laughed. Instead, I poured hot water into my bag and returned to my room, and my hands shaking. Not from the heat or the rage, but from the self-control it took not to scream. In the quiet of my room, I sat on the floor and opened an old photo album that was hidden under my bed. A photo fell out. A family photo from a camping trip when I was about 12 years old. Vera and Colster were smiling, hugging each other. Oshin was lighting the fire. I was barely visible at the edge of the frame. Half of my face was cut off, as if I'd been important enough to be in the center. It shook me more than words could say. That photo had always bothered me. But tonight, I felt differently. I felt that it was the truth. All these years, I had convinced myself that MY presence meant something. That MY help, MY work, MY obedience constituted love, or at least earned me respect. But none of that mattered. Not the laundry, not the dishes, not even the vacations I worked double shifts to buy them gifts they had already forgotten. AW about electricity. AW even about money. It had to deal with control. I had to deal with them knowing they could hurt me and choosing to do so anyway. I sat on the floor with the phone in my arms for a long time before finally getting up. I didn't cry, not because the W hurt, but because the pain had turned into something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Determination. I took a diary from my nightstand and lived through old notes full of doubts and excessive apologies. Then, on a clean page, I wrote in capital letters, "You're not what they say you are." I underlined it twice. For once, the silence W theirs. It was mine, and I was going to use it. The silence didn't end. It spread. It filled every corner of the house. Quiet is dust, but just as suffocating. The days passed without real words. Only the sounds of dishes clattering, doors closing, and the faint hum of the refrigerator. That was the rhythm of my life now. A life measured big way things left unsaid. One Thursday afternoon, a colleague at the library mentioned a new community program, an event aimed at connecting people through books and interraid. The idea was simple but sincere. A campaign for education and warmth. People could donate coats and used books, and families in need could take them for free. When I heard about it, something inside me stirred. Maybe it was the thought of warmth that didn't have to be earned or begged for. That night, after dinner, I sat in a well-lit office with a notebook and a mug of tea. The house was quiet, except for a little laughter from the living room as I watched a show about people renovating homes they couldn't afford to buy. I ignored it and started sketching ideas for the event. How to decorate the tables, how to involve local schools, how to make it seem like more than just charity. It would be nice to think again, to create something that isn't just about survival. I stayed up past midnight, perfecting every detail. For the first time in weeks, I felt awake. The next morning, as I was making coffee, Kalista walked into the kitchen wearing one of her spotless blouses, the kind she only wore when she wanted to look like she had everything under control. She noticed them were papers on the counter. "What is all this?" she asked casually as she poured a glass of orange juice. "Just an idea I'm working on for the library," I replied, unable to hide the pride in my voice. "A community event, something that combines books and helping people stay warm this winter." She leaned closer, flipping through the pages without asking. "Huh? Not bad. Did you come up with this?" "Yes," I replied. "It's still rough, but I think it could be something special." Collister smiled slightly. That polite smile that never reached her eyes. "Yes, special." She handed me back the papers and then took a sip of her juice, as if the conversation was over. I didn't think much of it. I wanted to believe she was interested, maybe even that she admired me for once. That was my mistake. 3 days later, during dinner, Vera was in a rare good mood. She had made her festive roast, something she only did when she was particularly proud of Kalista. The smell filled the house, rich and intense. I sat down at the table, expecting another quiet meal. But Vera started talking before anyone had taken a bite. "You wouldn't believe how brilliant your sister is," she said, almost glowing. Today she presented the most wonderful idea for a project at her company. A winter trip, books, coats, everything. Everyone said it was genius. I froze. The fork in my hand felt heavier. Kalista didn't look at me right away. She just smiled modestly. "Oh, it's nothing really. Just something that came to me." Vera dismissed her. Don't be humble. I told you your creativity would take you for. That is what sets you apart. The words blurred in my ears. I tried to swallow, but my throat tightened. A wee mind replayed every line of my notes, every day I had written down. Her exact words now wrapped in sanganeless applause. I wanted to speak up to call her out. But then I noticed Osw's face. He wasn't looking at anyone, just staring at his plate as if the potatoes had suddenly become fascinating. He knew. Of course he knew. He always knew and never did anything. I put my fork down slowly. It's funny, I said, in a calm voice. It sounds familiar. Colster finally looked me in the eye. For a moment, her smile faded, and the night returned, colder this time. Well, good ideas get around. Maybe we're just on the same wavelength. Vera laughed as if it were a cute coincidence. You see, you two share the same thought sometimes. No, I said quietly. We don't. The room fell silent. Vera frowned. Don't start, Nerina. You always turn good things into something negative. Callister leaned back, twirling her fork between her fingers. Maybe you should think of something of your own next time, instead of blaming me. And my pulse was pounding in my ears. The air around me was thick, heavy, filled with something poisonous. I pushed them chair back and stood up. Enjoy your meal. I left before they could say another word. Up in my room, I paced nervously for a long time. My thoughts were loud, colliding inside my head. This was nothing new. It had been my whole life. I thought about the Science Fair, when I built a model volcano and she presented it the following year as her own. The painting I had made for a local contest and she entered in my place. Even the topic of my college essay. She borrowed it for her internship application and got hired. I used to tell myself it didn't matter. That maybe it was proof I was worth copying. But tonight, I wouldn't find any more excuses. She didn't just take my ideas. She had taken the proof of my existence. I looked around my room at the walls covered with family photos. Vera insisted on hanging them everywhere. One in particular caught my attention. The photo from last Thanksgiving. All of us in front of the fireplace. Colster in the middle, smiling as if she had built the house herself. I was standing at the edge of the frame again, and my hands almost out of focus. I took it down. For a moment, I just held it, looking at their faces glowing in the warm light. Then I wrapped it in an old newspaper and put it in the back of my closet. I didn't throw it away. Not yet. Throwing it away would be forgetting, and I had to remember, because memory was the only power I had left. That night, I sat at my window watching the snow fall under the streetlight. The flakes glistened golden in the darkness. I thought about how beauty scene exists even in the coldest places, as long as there is sunshine to see it. I whispered to myself, certain that they could take my ideas, but not the memory of who really created them. Then came the gift that was not a gift at all. December arrived like a thief, quietly but sharply. There inside the house remained cold, no matter how many blankets I put on my bed. Vera said that this builds character. Calista spent her evenings humming Christmas songs while decorating the living room as if we were the perfect family. Strings of lights hung around the windows, a wreath on the door, scented candles on every table. It looked warm, but it blew. I helped anyway. I hung decorations, wrapped presents, and tied ribbons until my fingers cramped. Each gift had a tag for Calista, for Mom, for Dad. None for me. Still, I told myself maybe they had saved it for last. Like you saved dessert for last. Maybe this year would be different. One night, I was sitting on the floor near the tree, sorting through scraps of wrapping paper, when Calista came in carrying a bag from a famous designer. Mom said you should wrap this for me, she said, dropping it in front of me. What is it? I asked, and she smiled. Something I bought for myself, but I will look better under the tree if it's wrapped. I should have laughed. Instead, I just nodded and reached for the tape. That was the rhythm of our relationship, she gave the orders. I obeyed. Christmas morning arrived with the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls. I walked into the living room and found them already there, wearing her red robe, Calista sitting on the couch like a queen awaiting her subjects. And Oshin with his quiet Chelsea, pretending not to notice the tension. The tree was shining. Boxes and bags surrounded it, all perfectly wrapped in shiny paper. Good, you're finally awake, Vera said. We were waiting for you to open your present. For a moment, my heart beat loudly. A present after all these years. She gave me a small box, no bigger than a sandwich. It was carefully wrapped and tied with a gold ribbon. I smiled, cautiously, almost afraid to hope. I sat down and untied the ribbon. Inside the wrapping was a wet food box, one of those cheap cardboard boxes you get with Chinese takeout. The lid was bent. There was a sticky note on top. It said, "Recycle me." For a few seconds, I didn't understand. Then Kalista burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Mom, you really did it," she said between laughs. "It's hilarious." Their smile grew. "It's just a joke, sweetie. Don't take everything so seriously." Oshin let out a small, nervous laugh. The kind people use when they know they have to. I looked at the box, then at them. The laughter echoed off the walls. I could feel my face reddening, but I didn't move. "Go on," Kalista said, still laughing. "Ain't you going to say thank you?" I looked her straight in the eye and smiled slightly. "Thank you," I said. I didn't tremble. I put the lid back on, got up, and climbed the stairs. My legs were steady. My heart was not. In my room, I put the box on the nightstand. The laughter from below faded and became a noise in the background, quiet, distant, like static. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at that stupid box. The gift that broke me. It was the realization behind it. They didn't just forget to love me. They enjoyed watching me hurt. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Memories began to surface from corners I thought I had closed off forever. The fake birthday card when I turned the kexi that said, "Congratulations on making this for without getting punished." The time they left me behind at school and claimed they had forgotten. The sarcastic applause at my first job interview, when I came home nervous but proud. I told myself they were jokes. Family jokes. But they weren't funny. They were little knives, blunt enough to pass for play, sharp enough to bleed you over time. After a while, I sat down, took my diary out of the drawer, and opened a blank page. The pen hovered over the page for a long time before I finally wrote the words, "I am not what they laugh at." I stared at the sentence until it blurred. I wrote it again, pressing harder. And again, until the ink bled through the paper. The laughter from downstairs faded and then stopped. I heard the clatter of dishes, the closing of cupboards, normal sounds as if the world were still in order, but something inside me had changed. I got up, found a small box under my bed, and put the gift inside. I hid the box in my closet behind old sweaters and shoes. I didn't keep it out of sentimentality. I needed to remember how I felt when I stopped begging for kindness and started seeing things as they were. That night, as it snowed outside, I stood at the window and watched the reflection of the Christmas lights flicker on the glass. Below, the tree glowed softly, perfect and empty. I could faintly hear Lethia's voice through the ducts, telling Vera about the party she was throwing next week. Vera said something that made them both laugh again. That sound didn't hurt me anymore. It just confirmed what I already knew. I whispered to myself, not as a victim, but as a warning. That box was a gift. It was a message I finally heard. It was the wheel that finally broke the last thread of illusion. Dinner that night was almost normal, the kind of night that makes you believe the storm has passed. Vera made soup, her recipe for peace. Kalista bragged about her latest award at work, staring her bowl as if it were nothing. Oshin muttered about the news, pretending not to notice the tension woven into every word. I sat across from them, silent but alert. When you grow up in a house like mine, you learn to read tone faster than words. Vera was the first to break the silence. "We're going to see Benny today," she said, smoothing her napkin. "You remember him, right? Our lawyer." I looked up, unsure where this was going. "Guy?" "Oh, just to update a few things," she replied in a sweet but firm voice. "It's only fair, you know, to have everything in order, especially with Kalista doing so well and all." Her eyes turned to my sister with the same proud gleam that once made me jealous and now just made me feel tired. Kalista smiled, feigning humility. "Mom, you didn't have to." "No, No, Vera interrupted her. You weren't it. We just made a few adjustments. You know, life changes. Oshin stared his up without looking at me. That was his way of confirming something without saying it. What adjustments? I asked quietly. Vera gave it her hand as if shooing away a fly. Nothing that concerns you. You'll understand when the time comes. I wanted to press her, but I knew it's only. Her questions were like landmines. You didn't always hear the explosion, but you felt the damage later. Dinner ended in a thick silence that hung like fog. I helped clear the table, and when Vera went to take her evening bath, I noticed she had left the door to her office open. The office light was still on. I stood there for a minute, talking to myself. Then I went inside. The room smelled of furniture polish and lavender. The papers were neatly stacked in piles, labeled with her perfect handwriting. She was the kind of woman who kept receipts from the Capende years ago, just in case she needed to prove she was right. The middle drawer was unlocked. And my hand hesitated only for a moment before opening it. Inside was a cardboard folder. On top was written in black ink, "Will draft." I opened it. The first page listed his assets, his house, his bank account, his pension. Under primary beneficiaries, I saw Ithil's name. Below that, secondary beneficiaries, First Baptist Church of Boise. MYNW there, not even as an afterthought. I flipped through the pages, looking for any sign of myself. Nothing. It was as if I had never existed. I felt my pulse slow, not quicken. AW in shock. It was confirmation, something I knew deep down but didn't know to believe. They didn't just erase me from their love. They had erased me from their future. I closed the folder gently, as if it were something fragile, and put it back in the drawer. Then I went to the back door, opened it, and went outside. The yard was covered with snow. The swing we used to play on as children was leaning to one side, with one chain longer than the other. I walked barefoot across the frozen grass until I reached it and sat down. The cold beat into my skin, but I felt good, honestly, unlike the heat inside the house. This is no longer pain, I thought. It is clarity. I sat there for a long time, watching my breath form little clouds until the stars blurred. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. When I finally went back inside, I washed my feet in the sink, dried them, and went straight to bed. But I didn't sleep. My mind was like a movie reel, playing back every moment I had been told how lucky I was to have a roof over my head. Every time I had said thank you for crumbs disguised as care. In the morning, something inside me had changed from waiting to preparing. At breakfast, I walked into the kitchen where Vera was cutting fruit and Colster was looking at her phone. Oshin sat reading the newspaper as if it were an object in his own home. Good morning, Vera said in a light tone. Did you sleep well? I made coffee. Yes, actually, I replied. I was thinking about what you said last night. He raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, dear? The will? Justice? Her knife stopped mid-cheek. And I looked her straight in the eye. If you keep excluding me from everything, don't be surprised when one day I stop being here to clean up. Kalista laughed immediately, with a sharp laugh. Come on. Don't be dramatic. Vera shook her head, sighing as if I had disappointed her again. There you go. You always twist things and turn them into an attack. We're not bad people. Nerina didn't look up. She continued chewing, her fork moving rhythmically like a clock counting down. I took another sip of coffee. No, you're not bad. You're just very good editors. Vera frowned. I'm sorry. You delete anything that don't fit the story you want to tell, and obviously I don't fit. I put down my cup and left the room before she could reply. Upstairs, I started gathering things. My passport, my social security card, my birth certificate, old diaries, no clothes, no mementos, just proof that I was still real somewhere outside their narrative. I put everything in an envelope and hid it under my mattress. My hands were shaking. I felt steady, calm, almost serene. Later, from my window, I saw Vera in the garden pruning the bushes, humming softly as if she didn't just erase her child. Kalistester went outside to take a selfie in the snow. Oshin dug the driveway without looking up. They lived their lives like actors hitting their marks. Perfect family, perfect order, perfect lay. But now I know the truth. I wasn't just living. I was walking toward the version of myself that didn't believe could exist. So I left quietly, like a ghost who finally realized he was never welcome. The morning I left, Boise was covered in a thin layer of frost. Ain't snow anymore, but a little cold enough to make you shiver. The kind of cold that keeps you alert, that makes every breath feel like a warning. I woke up before everyone else. I didn't want to face anyone. Not because I was afraid, but because it was no longer necessary. There was nothing to prove. I dressed in layers, tied my hair in a low bun, and put the envelope I had hidden under my mattress in my bag. It contained the documents I would leave behind. Passport, social security card, diaries, and receipts that chronicled a decade of silence. I left my clothes, my books. The photographs I once considered memories worth keeping. None of it mattered anymore. The house was silent. Ultimately's car was already gone. The door to the little bedroom was closed, the light beneath it dim. Vera was probably still asleep, wrapped in her world of comfort and control. I stopped in the hallway, looking back toward the living room, the same room where I used to curl up on the couch and watch movies with my dad, where Vera would braid my hair before school. That house had ghosts, but not the kind that haunt. The kind you become when you stop being visible. I put my house in a plain envelope and put it in the mailbox outside. Then I turned and walked down the street, my breath stained in the frosty air. It was Tuesday. I remember because the bakery on 6th Street was just opening, and the smell of fresh bread hit me like something from another life. I kept walking past the library where I worked, past the post office, until I reached the old building above the flower shop. It was nothing special, just a room with a double bed, a rattling heater, and a single window overlooking the alley. But it was mine. No one here controlled the temperature. No one left notes stuck on the door about wasting electricity. No one told me who I had to be. The woman who owned the flower shop gave me a kinegiri smile. It's quiet, she said. Mostly delivery trucks and cats in the alley. I told her it sounded perfect. That night, I took a shower for as long as I wanted. No one knocked, no one yelled. I let the steam envelop me, stick to the walls, and fog up the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't rush. I stood under the water until my skin turned pink and the chill inside me began to relax. Then I made the end sat on the small window sill, my knees curled up, looking at the quiet street below. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just existed on my own terms. That alone was revolutionary. My phone buzzed on the counter. I approached Eddie, expecting a message from a spam number or perhaps an email from work. Instead, it was a notification from social media. Caller had posted a photo. It was her, Vera, endorsing at the table, smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Finally, peace at home." I stared at it for a moment. The arrogance, the smugness, the performance. I took a screenshot, saved it to a folder I had created weeks ago called proof, then closed my phone and put it face down. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt vindicated. Later that night, I sat at the small desk next to my bed and opened a notebook. I started making a list, not of the things I had lost, but of the things I never wanted back. No more dinners where silence was a weapon. No more rooms where I had to shrink myself to be tolerated. No more conversations where my words were used as fuel for someone else's fire. The list grew slowly, one line at a time. I didn't rush. I let its truth come when it was ready. By midnight, I had written only 7 things. That wasn't enough for now. The next morning, I went to the corner store and bought a USB stick. Back in my room, I started collecting everything. Emails where Vera scolded me as if I were a stranger. Voicemails that went unanswered. Photos from which I had been cut out, videos from birthdays when my name was not mentioned. Every fragment, every invisible piece, everything went into a folder labeled history. AW about revenge. A was about the truth. I didn't know yet what I would do with all of this. But I wanted to be ready for myself, if not for anyone else. By the end of the week, I had a small stack of evidence and a growing sense of who I could become. Because sometimes living isn't loud. Sometimes it's not a door slamming, or a suitcase opening. Sometimes it's a breath, a decision, a quiet dismantling of someone else's narrative. They will let him leave, but they would feel him way absence more strongly than any scream. It turns out that silence is not a void. It is a weapon when used with truth. I've been to geek since I left home. The room above the flower shop still smelled faintly of roses and coffee, and the heating hissed like an old man climbing stairs, but it was a home in a way that my childhood bedroom never was. Most nights I slept lightly but without dreams, the kind of sleep that came from quiet rather than comfort. One morning, as I was restocking a donation shelf in the library, one of the coordinators approached me holding a folder. I almost forgot, she said. You've been nominated for the Local Voices Award. I blinked. What is that? It's something we do every year to highlight people who have made a difference in the community. You've done a lot here, Nerina. The campaign you organized was really something special. I thanked her, but her words didn't make much of an impression on me. An award, recognition. It seemed foreign to me, as if someone's name had been spoken from my lips. Later that afternoon, I sat on the windowsill of a small room and wrote the short speech they had asked me for. Just 5 minutes, a few words about what the library meant to me, how important the community is. When I called Vera to tell her, more out of habit than hope, she interrupted me. They gave it to you. Her voice was sharp, unbelievable. You don't even speak loudly enough to make a speech. I was silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because what I had didn't need to be said to her. I just thought you might want to know, I replied. It's next Thursday. Well, I'm sure it's a sympathy vote, she muttered, and then changed the subject and talked about Thursday's promotion. After I hung up the phone, I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I opened my laptop and finished the speech, then saved it under the name First Voice. That night, just before going to bed, I checked social media out of habit. I didn't post much, but Kalista certainly did. She uploaded a new photo of Vera and Oshin sitting at a table in a restaurant, clinking their glasses in the dim light. The caption read, "Three's a crowd, always has been." The comments were full of heart emojis and phrases like beautiful family and goals. I didn't react. I just took a screenshot and added it to the folder labeled evidence. Then I closed the app. 2 days later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was short. Hi, I'm Milo from high school. Do you still live near Maple Avenue? I hesitated before replying. Not anymore. Guy? I have something you need to see. A video from last winter. My home security camera caught something. He sent me a link. I opened it, bracing myself. The video was dated February 2. It showed him in his backyard, covered in snow, quiet. Then me, standing on the back balcony in my pajamas, hugging myself. I was tapping on the glass, saying something. Behind me, through the sliding door, Vera and Colster were laughing in front of the TV, with plates of food at their feet. The date was clear. The sound was faint, but the image said enough. My hands were shaking, not out of shame, but because someone else had seen, someone had finally seen. Milo continued. I didn't know what to say then. I'm sorry. I just should have done something. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. Instead, I opened a blank document and started typing. Not a letter, not a complaint, just a story about a girl who was always told she was too quiet, who was erased from birthday cards and family photos, who stood in the cold while the people who claimed to love her laughed behind the glass. I didn't use names, I didn't need to. Anyone who had been through it would recognize it. I posted it on a private platform for trauma survivors with the title Rooms Where I Was Not Allowed to Exist. I closed my laptop and went to bed, expecting nothing. In the morning, the post had 2,000 views. By the evening, 12,000 messages had arrived. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for writing what I could never write. Your story is my story. Then a local journalist contacted me. She said she had read the text and that 3 different people had forwarded it to her. She asked me if I would be willing to share more publicly or not. I declined the interview, but gave her permission to quote the text. By the end of the week, the story had been published under the title The Daughter They Forgot. I read it once and then closed the tab. I wasn't interested in it going viral. I didn't want applause. I wanted the truth to come out. Not to hurt them, but to expose them, because they use silence to say me. I will now use it to expose them, without ever raising my voice. What happened next was beyond my control, but it was exactly what needed to happen. I was sitting on the floor of my room above the flower shop, folding clothes into piles that barely filled a drawer. When Milo sent me a message, "Your text is everywhere. I'm proud of you. They can't ignore you anymore." He attached screenshots of comments from strangers. Hundreds of people were responding to the anonymous essay I had published a few days earlier. That was my childhood too. And my mother called me ungrateful when I left home. I cried when I read it. I thought I was the only one. I read them all, indifferent at first, then breathless. The recognition from people I didn't know seemed more sincere than anything I had heard from my family in 30 years. Milo sent another message. "You said what none of you could say." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened my laptop, typed into the telefone's dashboard, and watched the number of views rise like a tide. The story had been reposted by a national platform. Two influencers had reposted it with captions like, "We need to talk about invisible daughters," and this moved me deeply. It didn't mention names that didn't need to be mentioned. The truth, when told clearly, don't need a target. It resonates on its own. Later that night, I received an email from a non-profit organization that works with adult survivors of domestic abuse. They had read the article and wanted to know if I would be willing to speak. "You should remain anonymous," they told me. "We're organizing a podcast for stories like yours. No pressure, only if you're ready." I hesitated. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I didn't want to be the face of a wellness campaign. But I wanted people like me to feel less alone. So I agreed, on one condition. And my voice would be altered. We recorded the episode in a small studio in the city center. The woman who interviewed me spoke softly but firmly. She never asked uncomfortable questions. She just let me tell things as they happened. At the end, she thanked me for my courage. I remember nodding and saying the blue courage. It was just finally speaking up after being silent for so long. The podcast aired on Friday. On Sunday, I received another email. This one was from a non-profit women's housing organization. They offered me a year's worth of housing and job support. "You don't have to pay us back." The case manager wrote, "You've already left once. Let us help you stay away." I signed the agreement without hesitation. It was a matter of charity. It was a matter of dignity, of no longer having to justify my existence. But the thing about the truth is that I don't stay silent. That same weekend, Kalista posted a photo of herself drinking wine at a brunch table. Vera and Jen sat next to her, smiling. The caption read, "Grateful for family." Some of you know what that really means. Underneath the post, new comments appeared that she didn't expected. "Are you the family from that story? You laughed while your daughter froze. It can be true, right?" A few hours later, Vera called. I let the phone ring. She called again. Then she sent me a message, "Please answer. I need to talk to you." I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the phone light up. Then I picked it up. She didn't yell. Not this time. Her voice was low, controlled, almost rehearsed. "We didn't know that bad, Nerina," she said. "We didn't know you felt that way. If we had known." I interrupted her. "You didn't know because you never asked. You were too busy with how we looked to care about how I lived." There was silence. I let her hold it. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "Please come home. We'll fix this." I inhaled and then exhaled slowly. "No, Mom. You can't fix something you didn't accidentally break." Another pause followed, longer this time. "Then what do you want from us?" she asked. I answered without hesitation. "Nothing. I don't want anything. That is the difference between us. You wanted me to stay silent. I just wanted to be heard. And now that I've been heard, you'll never have the chance to ignore me again." I hung up the phone. I stayed there for a long time after that. Not because I was shocked, but because I I was trembling. I was shivering. For the first time, I was afraid of losing them. Because I finally understood. I never really had them to begin with. They ignored me while I begged them to let me stay. Now they're begging me, and I'm not even looking back. 3 days after they begged me to come back, I found peace in a place without mirrors. The phone rang on a Thursday. It was one of those dull grey afternoons in early March, when the sky can't decide whether to sleep or shine. I had just returned from a walk, one of those aimless, slow walks around the block that you take when your thoughts are stronger than the walls seem bare. It's an gone for, just far enough to remind them my legs that they could still carry me. And my coat was still buttoned up. The zipper was stuck a little way up from the collar. I had put my gloves in one pocket and my phone in the other. The sound startled me, not because it was loud, but because it had been silent for so long, not just on vibrate. Silent in the way that tells you people have stopped trying. The screen lit up. Oshin. I didn't answer. I let it ring, watched the name disappear, and then the voicemail icon lit up. I listened to his message standing next to the radiator, the heat just starting to rise. And my hand hovered near the vent, as if I needed proof of the warmth to trust it. His voice was lower than I remembered, measured, almost rehearsed. Your mother hasn't been the same since you left, he began. She is quiet. She sits in the kitchen with the TV on, but she don't watch it. You were right about everything. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He didn't beg me to come back, and that somehow made it worse. I called him back about 10 minutes later. Enough time to make sure AW was shaking, enough time to realize AW was shaking. He answered on the first ring. No noise, no static, just breathing. As if he had been holding the phone in his hand the whole time. Enjoyed your message, I said. Neutrally, I thought. Then a long pause. I didn't call to defend her or myself. Fine, I replied. Not hoarsely, not kindly, just tiredly. I didn't know who bad it was. Not really. You did ask, I said, in a calm voice. He didn't deny it. He didn't offer excuses. I just wanted to say was sorry W better. I breathed softly. You were nothing. The line went silent, but he didn't hang up. You were watching, I said. That is the part I'll never forget. Not what she did, but what you didn't do. I know, he muttered. Another breath. Another pause, as if he were carefully weighing his next words. I won't call again, he said. I just wanted to see once. I nodded, without him being able to see me. Okay, hang up. That was the last time I heard from him. 2 weeks later, I moved into a new apartment. The non-profit had helped me get on the list. A subsidized apartment on the 3rd floor, with new windows, a balcony big enough for a chair and a plant that offered hope. From the edge, I could see trees just beginning to bud, skeletal branches with promises hidden beneath. A.W. much. The floors creaked as if they carried the weight of 100 years of footsteps. The radiator rattled like an old typewriter warming up. The kitchen faucet dripped unless we turned the tea of twice. But it was mine. And there were no mirrors. Not in the bathroom. Not above the sink, not behind the doors. The owner, a tired man named Will with a clipboard and thick glasses, offered to bring one. I have an extra one, he said, scratching his beard. No charge. I smiled. Thanks, but I'm okay. And I really was. I bought furniture slowly, little by little. A shelf from a thrift store that leaned slightly to the left but a wobble. A used kettle in a shade of blue that resembled the morning sky, with a crack in the base but still sturdy. It made the water taste different, softer, like the beginning of something rather than the end. I bought a plant from the corner shop, small, leafy, nameless. I named it June, not because it reminded me of summer, but because I felt it was the beginning of a month I could survive. June didn't ask for much, just light, a little water, time. It reminded me of myself. I started working part-time at the library again, tidying the shelves, sorting, answering quiet questions from people who whispered even when they didn't need to. I filled the rest of my time with writing, not diaries or letters I would never send. Real writing, short stories, fiction. Although some truths seep into fiction, whether you want them to or not. I wrote about girls who disappeared in houses full of people who claimed to love them. About mothers who wore pearls to church but peeled away the color with their words. About silence so deep it seemed manufactured. Multi-layered and deliberate. I never used names. Not at first. But one morning, with the sunlight streaming through the kitchen window and the warm enough to open it a few inches, I sat down and wrote something new. And at the end, I signed my name, Nerina. The last line read, sometimes survival and about staying. It's about living and living so loudly, so honestly, that you never have to ask for permission again. I sent it to the same website where I had first shared my stories anonymously. A place where I had once whispered into the void, unsure if anyone would hear me. This time, they heard me. Within hours, I received comments from women in their 60s, from first-year students, from teachers, nurses, baristas, single mothers, from people who had stood in the corners of rooms where they didn't belong, hoping that no one would notice the bruises under their sleeves or the tremor in their I'm fine. They wrote about liberation, about living, about staying silent until there's little anymore. And I responded, not always with words, but with the kind of listening that matters. Meanwhile, the lives of those I left behind did not move forward. Kelly's Instagram stopped working. There were no more posts with golden hours on the beach. There were no more branches with pastel filters, only absence. This book club slowly disbanded. First fewer visitors, then forgotten meetings, and then nothing. No grand announcements, just silence. Reputation doesn't need scandal to be destroyed. It just needs people to stop pretending. I didn't celebrate. I didn't dance to their distraction or give them pain. I just breathed easier, knowing their voices would follow me here. One evening, just as the snow began to melt and the sidewalks became slippery with memories, I was walking home from the store, and my coat buttoned up, a small bag of lemons bumping against my thigh, and my keys read in one hand. The sky above was that soft pink that only appears after a long winter day that softens at the edges. As I passed a house 2 blocks away from mine, I saw it. A family on the porch, a teenager running inside. Her mother shouted something sharply. Her father caught the door before it slammed shut. I didn't stop. I didn't look. I just kept walking. That wasn't my life. But now I had a warm room, a shelf of stories that were mine, a name I no longer had to hide, dinner to make, a book waiting for me on my nightstand, and hit a good turn whenever I wanted. Once they locked me out for using too much heat. But I found a warmth they will never feel. Sometimes the deepest betrayal comes not from strangers, but from the people who are supposed to protect you. This story isn't just about being locked out in the cold. It was about years of emotional isolation, erasure, and ultimately the decision to leave. Have you ever had to make the painful decision to leave people behind, not out of hatred, but to protect yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more real life stories that tell the truth many are afraid to speak.